Well, Nico, speaking of Passchendaele, you very kindly went out on your own. You found time between all of your spring touring and you filmed some Monday Night Travel video exclusives, including some videos at the Passchendaele Gardens. So we are going to take a peek at those now and get a closer look at some of this World War I history.
There's more to Flanders Fields than Yper, which is the big city of Flanders Fields area in World War I tourism. We also have the little town of Zonnebeke, which has a village called Passchendaele in Dutch, but for especially Canadians known as Passchendaele. And on the communal side of Zonnebeke, they have this museum, which is the Passchendaele World War Memorial Museum. And it's not only a great museum where you learn how it was to be a soldier in the First World War, the Great War as they called it. You also see a little bit how life was in the trenches. But I personally come here for the garden. They have an incredible memorial garden, and I want to walk through it because this time of the year, of course, we may still see more flowers than usual. In 2013, the city here, Zonnebeke, decided to annex 2 castle grounds by creating a memorial park, which they designed with different small gardens of Allied forces in the shape of a poppy. And in every single poppy-shaped garden, you have indigenous plants of the countries that fought in the First World War.
Nico, can you remind me what is the significance of the poppy flower in World War I?
Well, the poppies, they're not really that abundant here in the area. People know it, and it's linked to Flanders Fields, and it's the symbol of remembrance. And often tourists come and they say, "Where are the poppies?" And you don't see them. But apparently in 1915, the soil, after years of battling, was apparently rich enough to have an overabundance of poppies. And so a lot of soldiers who wrote letters home mentioned it, not only in our area, but also, for instance, Gallipoli in Turkey. Maybe you know the movie with Mel Gibson, but also a lot of people fought in the First World War in Turkey. And so poppies popped up there as well. And it was basically became an immortal image because of a poem by John McCrae, a Canadian doctor, who wrote "In Flanders Fields, where poppies grow." It's basically a standard poem about the First World War. And so this park shaped it with different poppies. And then every poppy represents a country that was fighting in the war.
Wow, and it's fascinating that it, just happened more during that specific period of time. All right, let's continue touring the garden.
This is the Canadian section, and you do have some visitors, but it's never really crowded. And I'm going to walk to the American poppy garden as well, which is over there. So it's a communal park, but now called the Memorial Park of Passchendaele. Every country, like for instance the Belgian garden or the French garden or the British garden, there's also the Australian and New Zealand garden as well, I believe. But maybe our viewers want to see the American poppy garden, which has a map of the US with a quote from Woodrow Wilson, which is maybe interesting to show. And you may see that we're not mowing the grass this month. It's to give nature some time to breathe. So this is the American poppy garden, and I'll end with a quote by President Woodrow Wilson. "Belgium, the whole world will agree, must be evacuated and restored without any attempt to limit the sovereignty which she enjoys in common with all other free nations. This is the French garden in the park, and I really like the fact that next to a museum with a lot of heavy information inside, there's a garden where you can go for a walk. It's a very nice, pleasant walk in the garden, and reflect on what you just learned about in the museum inside. I'm at the New Zealand garden, and I want to show you something that I think is quite striking. It's just like a concrete pillar that you see, but it has all kinds of little holes in it, and every hole represents the 846 soldiers from New Zealand who died in a battle here. And it gives you kind of like a daunting moment when you step into the column.
Nico, you used the word striking for that, and I think that striking, that's just a perfect adjective. And I guess I was surprised to learn that New Zealand and Australia had armies in World War I. I'm sure that's maybe common knowledge for World War I buffs, but I do not count myself among those ranks. Can you explain why New Zealand and Australia got involved?
Well, this is 1914, 1918. And so countries like Australia, New Zealand still were basically Britain, but overseas. Together also with Canada, they belong to what is now known as the Commonwealth. So there was a strong link with the motherland, England or Scotland or Ireland or Wales. And so when England was at war, when Britain was at war, there was this need to go help. And so from Australia and New Zealand, but also from Canada, several people came over to fight a war that really wasn't theirs, but it was more, it was campaigning, especially in Australia. You may have heard the term ANZAC. It's Australia, New Zealand Army.
Army Corps.
Yeah. And so basically what happened is that they, I think from Australia and New Zealand, about 330,000 soldiers came over to Europe, not only in France and in Belgium, but also in Turkey. And so at the beginning, it was voluntarily. Why did people come? Out of maybe just the link with the motherlands. But it's interesting to know that actually after the First World War, the countries like Australia, New Zealand, they kind of started maybe cutting loose from the motherland after realizing, why would we have to go fight someone else's battle? But at the time, it was very much part of the British Empire still. So I'm using brackets because I don't know the terminology at the time when Australia and New Zealand or Canada, I mean, they all still have the head of state of England, so they still are connected. But that's why they were there. And the park actually has a very nice sculpted wooden sculpture from Maoris who gave it for the centennial celebration. So there's a beautiful sculpted Maori symbol there as well.
All right, well, let's keep exploring.
I cannot film inside of the museum, which is excellent, by the way, but I can walk in the trenches and film here outdoors as well. They're recreated, but they are on the location of real trenches, and you can see a little bit the loopholes, the way the Germans specifically were able to defend the area. Inside of the museum, you learn about the different sides of the World War I history, but also focus on, for instance, the role of women during the war. So a lot of material. They also have the dugout experience, which is underneath of the museum, and learns about how they were treating the sick. This is, for instance, how it looked when they found it, and this is how it's been redone, reinforced. And after walking through the trenches, which are replicas of part British and part German trenches, you can have a visit to this little tiny house, which looks like an American house, and it is. It's something that is not often mentioned, but after the war, the Americans built temporary houses for the locals who wanted to return to the area that was devastated and destroyed. And inside is now a museum that talks a bit more about the American part of the First World War. And it also shows, for instance, that there's a remembrance trail of the First World War that kind of starts in France and all the way ends up here, where we are right now.
Well, Nico, thank you again for that recent look at the Passchendaele Gardens. And we're now going to take a look at one more Flanders Field site that I believe you filmed this earlier in the pandemic. So let's take a look.
Their name lived forevermore. I'm at the Tyne Cot Cemetery. I was supposed to be here with a group of 28 tourists. It would have been crowded. It's the time of the year when you have a lot of tourists come here, but also a lot of school kids, especially from Britain. Now there's nobody. This is the Commonwealth Cemetery in Passchendaele, 12,000 casualties are buried here. The cross of sacrifice in the middle, built on a German bunker. This was the site of a big battle, the Battle of Passchendaele. So 12,000 casualties, but also the names of 35,000 missing in action on the memory wall that you see in the back. Striking is, compared to what I normally see here, that there's no little roses, little poppies that normally are placed by the many school teenagers who come here from Britain to honor their great-grandparents who fought in the First World War.
So, Nico, I'm curious, it seems like at least in this part of the country, in this part of Flanders, World War I is very much front of mind. Is that something that a lot of students learn about during school? Do the schools in Belgium very intentionally try to keep educating students about this period of history?
It's part of the curriculum. So any kid has to learn about it. It's for Belgium, I think the First World War, especially in this region, was more devastating than the Second World War. In other parts of Belgium, that's not the case. But here in West Flanders, because of the battlefields, even if you don't go to school, I mean, the cemeteries are everywhere. You're constantly confronted with it. So over here in this part of Belgium, in elementary school, you already have much to learn about it because it's there. I mean, it's easy when it's there, you learn more about it. When we see secondary schools, we have them from France, from the rest of Belgium, from the Netherlands, who come visit this cemetery. But they're not always, I noticed like now it was super quiet in the video. This was shot in 2020. Mm-hmm. And if you go now, you already have the school groups. And then of course, half of the teenagers have to be there because they have to, but they don't really, they're taking selfies on the cemetery and so on, or just sit there on their smartphone being uninterested. but we do see a lot of British school groups who, I mean, they come on several day trips, and they are much more prepared, and they have to learn about their family. What did their family do in the First World War? So I think the British school groups are a bit more prepared when they visit, and the elementary schools in the region are very well aware of it. And then, like anything, you know, teenagers from around, I mean, they have to go on a school trip, but they're more interested in buying the chocolates on the market of Ypres than maybe the cemeteries, which is sad. But it's a very, it's part of our history, you know. It's a lot of things changed after the First World War. There was more of a Flemish identity after the First World War. So there's several things that are important, and that's why it's part of the curriculum.